My name is Maya Whitmore, and I never thought my marriage would end in public, with my husband choosing my best friend in front of people who knew us both. This is the kind of betrayal that doesn't just break your heart, but forces you to decide who you're going to become after. I'm telling it exactly as it happened, from my side, without filters or excuses. If this resonates with you, tell me where you're watching from, and hit the like and hype button. Because some stories don't end in shame. They end in strength. The room went quiet in a way that didn't feel accidental. I noticed it before I understood it. The way conversations stalled, the way someone near the back stopped mid-laugh, the way a glass clinked too loudly and then nothing followed. Silence rolled across the patio like a wave pulling back before it breaks. I was standing near the bar, waiting for my husband to finish a conversation so we could leave together. That was the plan. Show up, be seen, say the right things, go home. Normal? Predictable? Safe. I turned just as someone whispered my name. Maya. I followed the sound. Caleb wasn't looking at me. He was standing by the fire pit, one hand wrapped around a drink that wasn't his usual, the other resting on Renee's lower back like it had always belonged there. Not awkward, not hesitant, familiar, intimate, possessive. Renee, my best friend, the woman who held my hand during my mother's surgery, the woman who slept in our guest room when her divorce papers came through, the woman who told me I was lucky, over and over, to have a husband like Caleb. Her head was tilted toward him. She was smiling. I waited for someone to laugh and say it was a joke. No one did. I took a step forward. Then another. My heels felt too loud on the stone, like I was announcing myself when I shouldn't have to. Caleb still didn't turn. Renee did. Her smile didn't disappear. It tightened. That's when I knew. I said Caleb's name once. Calm, clear, the way you say it when you expect an answer. He turned slowly, like this moment had weight, like he'd been rehearsing it. Maya, he said. Not surprised, not guilty, just prepared. Every pair of eyes shifted to me. Friends, colleagues, neighbors, people we'd vacationed with, people who'd toasted our anniversaries. I felt suddenly too visible. What's going on? I asked. Renee's hand stayed on his arm. Caleb exhaled like I was inconveniencing him. We were going to tell you. A few people sucked in air. Someone near the edge muttered, "Oh my God." Tell me what? I asked. He glanced at Renee, then back at me. That we're together. The word hit the ground between us and didn't bounce. Together. I laughed once, sharp and disbelieving. That's not funny. Renee finally spoke. Maya, please don't make this harder than it has to be. Harder. My heart started pounding so fast it made my vision pulse. You're standing here, I said, gesturing at the two of them, touching my husband, and you're asking me not to make this hard? Caleb stepped forward like he was about to put a hand on my shoulder. I stepped back. We didn't plan for it to come out like this, he said. But it's real. It's been real for a while. For how long? I asked. He hesitated. That hesitation told me everything. Answer her, someone behind me said. I didn't turn, but I recognized the voice. A woman who'd been at our house 2 weeks earlier. A woman who'd hugged Renee goodbye in my kitchen. Caleb swallowed. Months. My knees almost buckled. I locked them. Renee finally dropped her hand from his arm, but not because she felt wrong, because she wanted to look sincere. It wasn't supposed to hurt you like this. I stared at her. Really stared. Her hair was done the way she knew Caleb liked. Her dress was one I'd helped her choose. You slept in my house, I said quietly. You cried to me. You let me defend him to you. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Caleb straightened his shoulders. I didn't mean for it to happen. But I can't pretend anymore. I love her. There it was. Out loud, in public, with witnesses. Someone dropped a glass. It shattered. I felt something inside me tear. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just a clean rip, like fabric giving way. The future I thought I was standing in vanished in that second. Every plan. every assumption. I nodded once. Okay, I said. Caleb blinked. Okay? I reached down, slipped my wedding ring off my finger, and held it up between us. The metal felt colder than it should have. You want her? I said. You can have her. Renee flinched. I set the ring on the edge of the fire pit, right where everyone could see it. You don't get me, I continued. You don't get my silence, and you don't get to walk away from this clean. Caleb's face hardened. You don't need to threaten me. I'm not, I said. I'm informing you. I looked around the circle of people watching us. Some of them looked embarrassed. Some looked angry. A few looked relieved they weren't me. I hope you enjoy tonight, I said to both of them. Because it's the last night either of you get to feel comfortable for a very long time. Renee shook her head. Maya, please. I didn't let her finish. I turned and walked away. Not fast, not shaking. Every step deliberate. Behind me, the silence broke into whispers. Phones came out. Names were said. The story started moving without me. I didn't look back. By the time I reached my car, my hands were steady. By the time I pulled onto the road, my tears were gone. And somewhere between the first red light and the second, I made myself a promise. Not out of rage, not out of desperation, but out of clarity. They took something from me in public. I would take everything back in private, and they would never see it coming. Caleb and I didn't start out dramatic. We started practical. We met in our mid-20s, both freshly settled into careers that required patience more than luck. He liked to say we were low risk, high reward. Back then, I took it as a compliment. We built slowly, shared rent, shared savings, shared calendars taped to the fridge. When we married, it wasn't fireworks. It was certainty. I was the planner, the stabilizer, the one who made sure things didn't fall apart. When his job stalled early on, I covered more of the bills without making it a conversation. When he wanted to take a risk on a new role, I backed it with my savings and my silence. We agreed I'd keep my consulting work flexible so we could adapt. Adapt became my default setting. Renee came into our lives during that phase. We'd known each other in college, but we reconnected after she moved back to Boulder post-divorce. She was raw, outspoken, funny in a way that made pain feel manageable. I welcomed her without hesitation. She became part of our routine. Sunday dinners, long walks, late-night wine at our kitchen table. She praised Caleb constantly. Told me I'd won the husband lottery. I didn't notice how often she defended him when I vented, how she framed his distance as stress, his irritability as pressure. I trusted her because she sounded like me. There were signs. I see them now with painful clarity. Caleb started guarding his phone. Not dramatically, just subtle enough to excuse. He stopped asking about my day. He stayed later at work, then later still. When I asked if something was wrong, he said I was imagining distance because I'd been overworked lately. Renee agreed. She told me I needed rest, perspective, that marriage had seasons. When I inherited money from my aunt, we decided together to put it toward the house. It wasn't romantic, but it was smart. I put the funds in first. His name stayed on everything. I didn't hesitate. We were married. We were a team. By the time I noticed how often Renee was at our place when I wasn't home, it felt rude to question it. She was family. That's what she called herself. The night before the public betrayal, she texted me. Asked if we were still on for brunch later that week. Added a heart emoji. I answered yes. The confirmation didn't come from my intuition. It came from my younger sister. She called me the morning after everything exploded. Her voice was careful in a way that made my stomach drop. Maya, she said, I didn't want to be right. She'd seen them weeks earlier. Together. Not hiding. Renee's hand on his arm. His head tilted toward her the way it used to tilt toward me. When my sister confronted him privately, he didn't deny it. He asked her not to tell me until he figured things out. He was figuring out how to leave without consequences. As she spoke, I opened our shared financial dashboard for the first time in months. I saw withdrawals I didn't recognize. Small, spaced out. Easy to miss unless you knew what you were looking for. I closed the laptop. That was the moment the story stopped being emotional and became strategic. This wasn't just betrayal. It was calculated. And I was done being the only one playing fair. I didn't wake up angry the next morning. That surprised me. I woke up clear. There was no dramatic realization, no shaking hands, no voice in my head screaming, just a calm understanding that the life I'd been protecting was already gone, and the only thing left to decide was how much of myself I was willing to lose with it. I made coffee. Black. Sat at the kitchen table where Renee had laughed with me 100 times. I didn't cry. I opened my laptop. The first call I made was to a lawyer. Not one recommended by friends. Not one with billboards. I searched quietly, filtered for experience, and chose a woman whose bio mentioned asset protection and complex marital estates. When she answered, I told her exactly what had happened and asked one question. What do I need to do today? She didn't gasp. She didn't sympathize. She said, do not leave the house. Do not confront him again, and document everything. I started a folder, screenshots, bank statements, calendar logs, old emails I'd never deleted, text threads with Renee that suddenly read like a confession in reverse. I backed it all up twice. Then I logged into our joint accounts. I didn't drain them. I froze what I was legally allowed to freeze. Enough to stop movement. Enough to make him notice. I transferred my inheritance into a separate account, the one mistake I'd made years earlier finally corrected with a few clicks. By noon, the house felt different. Like it knew. I packed a single bag, not to run, but to be ready. Important documents, my passport, jewelry that had belonged to my aunt. I left everything else exactly where it was. When Caleb texted, I didn't answer. By mid-afternoon, I met with a real estate agent. We walked the house quietly, like two people touring a property that already belonged to someone else. She told me what it could sell for. I told her to prepare the paperwork. That evening, I changed every password I could without alerting him. Cloud storage, email recovery, financial apps. I turned off location sharing. I removed his access to my calendar. Each small action felt like reclaiming oxygen. At some point, my phone rang again. Caleb. I let it go to voicemail. His message was clipped. We need to talk. This is getting out of hand. I listened to it twice, then archived it. By the time he got home, it was dark. I was sitting on the couch, laptop closed, bag by the door. He stopped short when he saw it. What's that? He asked. A precaution, I said. He scoffed. You're being dramatic. I finally looked at him. Really looked. He seemed smaller, less sure, like someone who expected chaos and found quiet instead. I spoke to a lawyer today, I said, his face drained of color. You did what? I froze the accounts I'm allowed to freeze. The house is being listed, and you're not staying here tonight. He laughed, but it cracked halfway through. You can't just decide that. I already did. He stepped closer. Maya, slow down. We can figure this out. I stood. You already did. Months ago. Silence settled between us. Not heavy. Final. This isn't revenge, I continued. This is separation. He opened his mouth, then closed it. For the first time since the patio, he looked genuinely shaken. Where am I supposed to go? He asked. I picked up my bag. That's no longer my problem. I walked past him, out the door and into the night without looking back. Not because I was done, but because the game had already shifted. And he was just realizing he was no longer in control. The consequences didn't arrive all at once. They trickled in, quiet and precise, the way reality does when it finally catches up. By the second morning after I left, Caleb noticed the money. He called 3 times before noon. I didn't answer. Then the texts started. Short at first, then sharper. Why can't I transfer funds? This better be a glitch. You need to fix this. I forwarded every message to my lawyer without responding. Renee found out next. Not from him. From the silence. She texted me a paragraph that began with, "I never meant for it to happen like this," and ended with, "I hope we can talk like adults." I didn't reply. I archived the message and muted her number. Later that day, she tried to reach me through a mutual friend. That friend didn't pass the message along. People were choosing. By midweek, the house listing went live. Photos of my living room appeared online, the couch Renee had sat on, the kitchen where she'd leaned against the counter pretending to listen while I spoke about my marriage. A neighbor texted me the link with a single line, "Is everything okay?" I answered honestly, "No, but it will be." Caleb showed up at the house that night anyway. He wasn't supposed to. The locks had been changed, but muscle memory is powerful. I watched him from across the street, sitting in my car. As he realized his key no longer worked, he knocked, then knocked harder. When no one answered, he called me. I didn't pick up. Eventually, he leaned his forehead against the door, stayed there for a long moment, then walked away. Not defeated, just confused. Renee's fallout was messier. She worked in the same social circles I did. Fitness classes, community boards, women's networking groups. People stopped responding to her messages. Someone removed her from a shared group chat. Another canceled a standing brunch. She posted a photo online that night, a vague caption about truth and healing. The comments were polite, distant. The story had already moved past her version. Caleb tried to control the narrative next. He emailed our friends, framing the split as mutual, respectful, complicated. I didn't counter it publicly. I didn't need to. People had been there. They'd seen his hand on her back. They'd heard his voice when he said he loved her. You can't revise a moment that had witnesses. His parents called me 2 days later. His mother cried. His father didn't speak much, but when he did, it was clipped and careful. We didn't raise him to behave this way. I thanked them and said nothing more. That night, Caleb finally reached me. Not through anger, through panic. "I can't access anything," he said when I answered. His voice was tight. "My card got declined." "That's temporary," I replied. "You can't just cut me off," he said. "I have bills." "So do I." Silence. "Renee's freaking out," he added, like that should matter to me. "That's unfortunate." He exhaled hard. "You're enjoying this." "No," I said calmly. "I'm stabilizing my life." Another pause. Longer. "I didn't think you'd move this fast," he admitted. I almost smiled. "Neither did you," I said. The next day, my lawyer called to confirm something that felt unreal even as she said it. Caleb had tried to open a new line of credit using shared information. It had been flagged. He was unraveling. By the end of the week, his calls changed tone. Less accusation, more bargaining. "I'll move out quietly," he said. "I'll keep this civil." "It already is," I replied. I hung up before he could say anything else. That night, I slept through the first full night since the betrayal. The panic had passed. The shock had burned off. What remained was momentum, and the quiet understanding that this was only the beginning, but the first consequences had landed exactly where they needed to. The second confrontation wasn't planned. That's what made it worse for them. It happened 10 days after the house listing went live, on a Saturday afternoon, in a restaurant Caleb insisted we still shared history with. A place where the lighting was clean, the crowd was visible, and voices carried just enough to be overheard. He asked to meet to talk logistics. I agreed. Not because I owed him closure, but because timing matters, and I knew exactly where he was in the collapse cycle. Renee was there when I arrived. That alone told me everything. She sat beside him, not across. Her hand rested on the table near his, close but not touching, like she wanted plausible deniability. When she saw me, she stiffened, then forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Maya," she said softly. "Thank you for coming." I didn't acknowledge her. I took the empty chair across from them and sat down, placing my phone face up on the table. The screen lit briefly, Recording already on. Not for drama, for accuracy. Caleb cleared his throat. We thought it would be good if we all talked like adults. Who's we? I asked. He blinked. Renee looked down at her water. I'm not here to negotiate emotions, I continued. You said logistics. Start. He shifted. The house sale. We should pause it. The market's volatile. No. Renee finally spoke. Maya, you're making this harder than it needs to be. We didn't want to hurt you. I turned to her for the first time. You didn't want to hurt me, I repeated. But you wanted my life. Her face flushed. That's not fair. I leaned back slightly. You sat at my table. You slept under my roof. You asked me about my marriage while you were dismantling it. A couple at the next table stopped pretending not to listen. Caleb jumped in. This isn't helping. I nodded. You're right. Let's help. I slid a folder onto the table and opened it halfway. Not enough for details. Enough for implication. These are the bank records showing transfers you didn't disclose, I said. The messages you deleted but forgot about on your laptop. The timeline that contradicts every version of this story you've told anyone. Renee's breath caught. Caleb's face went pale. You brought that here? He hissed. I brought myself here, I replied. The truth just came with me. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. You're embarrassing us. I met his eyes. No, I'm clarifying. Renee's composure cracked. You're doing this on purpose. In public. Yes. The word landed clean. I spent weeks being spoken about, I continued. Whispered about. Pitied. Framed as dramatic or cold or difficult. You don't get to rewrite me quietly. The waiter arrived, hesitated, then asked if we were ready to order. No, I said without looking away from them. We're finishing something. Caleb rubbed his temples. What do you want, Maya? I didn't answer immediately. I let the silence stretch, just long enough for attention to sharpen. I want you to stop lying, I said. And I want you to understand that this doesn't end with you walking away into something better. Renee stood abruptly. I can't do this. Her chair scraped loudly. Every head nearby turned. Caleb reached for her wrist. Sit down. She yanked her hand back. This isn't what you said it would be. I watched them with a strange sense of detachment, like a structure failing exactly where it was weakest. She grabbed her bag. I'm not ruining my life over this. And just like that, she left. The silence afterward was heavier. Caleb stared at the empty chair beside him, then at me. You planned that. I planned for honesty, I said. The rest was inevitable. His voice dropped. You didn't have to humiliate me like this. I stood. You humiliated me when you chose secrecy over respect, I said. I'm just refusing to absorb the damage quietly. I gathered my folder and slid my chair back. As I walked away, I paused just long enough to say one final sentence. Not loud, not theatrical, but clear enough to carry. You didn't lose me when you cheated, I said. You lost me when you thought I wouldn't survive it. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The damage was already done. And this time, everyone saw who caused it. Caleb didn't collapse quietly. He tried to control the story. 2 days after the restaurant, a long post appeared on his social media. Measured tone, carefully chosen words, comments limited. He wrote about complex relationships, about private matters becoming public, about how hurtful it was to be judged during a painful transition. He never used Renee's name. He never used mine either. He framed himself as thoughtful, misunderstood, calm in the middle of chaos. People responded exactly how he hoped they would, at first. Comments trickled in offering support. Old colleagues wrote about how good of a guy he was. Someone said they hoped we could both find peace. It was neat, controlled, sanitized. Then the receipts surfaced. Not from me. From people who were tired of being lied to. A woman from his office posted a screenshot in a private group. A calendar invite labeled Client Dinner that overlapped with Renee's Instagram story from the same night, tagged at a boutique hotel bar. Someone else shared an email timestamp that contradicted his version of when the affair began. The whispers picked up speed. Then Renee panicked. She posted her own statement, emotional, defensive, heavy on the word unexpected. She framed herself as falling into something she hadn't asked for. She wrote about friendship breakups like they were weather events, unavoidable, tragic. She disabled comments within an hour. By that evening, someone created a thread compiling timelines. Nothing sensational, just dates, locations, screenshots, overlaps. It didn't accuse. It didn't editorialize. It just laid everything out in order. The post spread, not because it was dramatic, because it was undeniable. Caleb called me that night. "You're doing this," he said. "You're leaking things." "No," I replied. "I'm letting the truth exist." "You're destroying my reputation." I almost laughed. "You introduced your reputation to reality," I said. "This is the result." He went quiet. Then his voice shifted, softer, more urgent. "Can you make it stop?" That was the moment I knew he finally understood. "This isn't something I control anymore," I said. "You made it public, remember?" He hung up without another word. The next morning, his employer placed him on administrative leave. Not because of morality, because of optics. Clients were forwarding links. HR wanted explanations he couldn't give without contradicting himself. Renee lost contracts too. Nothing formal. Just quiet emails saying priorities had shifted. Projects paused indefinitely. Their phones didn't stop ringing. Mine barely rang at all. Friends reached out to me privately, not to ask for details, to apologize, for doubting, for staying silent, for assuming there was more to the story. I thanked them and kept my boundaries intact. The real escalation came when someone reposted my line from the restaurant. "You didn't lose me when you cheated. You lost me when you thought I wouldn't survive it." It appeared on a plain background, no name attached, just the sentence. It spread faster than anything else. People added their own stories underneath. Women, men, strangers. Each one recognizing something familiar in it. Not the betrayal, but the underestimation. Caleb texted me a screenshot of it. "That's you." "I know," I replied. "Tell them to take it down." "I can't," I said. "It doesn't belong to me anymore." He didn't respond. By the end of the week, the narrative had flipped completely. He wasn't thoughtful. He was strategic. She wasn't caught off guard. She was complicit. And I wasn't dramatic or vindictive. I was absent. And that absence said everything. They stopped posting, stopped correcting, stopped pretending. Because once the story escapes your hands, there's no pulling it back without tearing yourself apart. The last message Caleb sent that week was short. "I didn't think it would get this bad." I read it once and deleted it. Because this wasn't bad. This was exposure. And it was only escalating from here. The legal part wasn't dramatic. That was the cruelest part. There were no shouting matches in court, no cinematic speeches, no last-minute apologies that changed outcomes. There was paperwork, dates, numbers, decisions that couldn't be argued with emotion because emotion had already been exhausted. Caleb showed up to the first mediation looking smaller than I remembered. His suit was pressed, but it didn't sit right on him anymore. He kept glancing at his phone like it might save him. It didn't. My lawyer spoke for me. Calm. Exact. Every sentence backed by documentation. The inheritance I'd contributed. The timeline of withdrawals. The attempted credit line. The shared assets versus the separate ones he assumed would stay shared forever. The mediator barely looked at me. They didn't need to. Caleb tried once. Just once. That money was meant for our future. My lawyer didn't raise her voice. It was meant for the marriage. The marriage ended when he redirected marital resources toward an undisclosed relationship. Silence followed. Not awkward. Decisive. The house sale went through faster than expected. Clean offer. No contingencies. I signed digitally from a short-term rental that already felt more peaceful than the home I'd left. Caleb fought for the garage tools. the patio furniture. Small things that made him feel less like he was losing everything. He lost the big things anyway. When the financial split finalized, the numbers were unforgiving. His credit had taken hits from declined accounts and flagged activity. His savings were thinner than he'd admitted. My lawyer had anticipated it. He walked away with less than half of what he'd assumed was untouchable. Renee wasn't mentioned in the legal documents, but her collapse happened alongside his. She reached out once, not to apologize, but to explain. She said she'd been misled, that Caleb had promised clarity, commitment, protection, that she'd believed him. I didn't respond. The fallout didn't stop at money. Caleb's family fractured quietly. His father called me before the divorce finalized, asked if we could meet. We did, briefly, in a cafe near his office. He looked older, tired in a way that wasn't about age. "I won't excuse what he did," he said, "and I won't support it." I nodded. That was enough. When Caleb found out his parents had withdrawn financial help they'd offered him months earlier, he called me furious. "You turned them against me," he accused. "No," I said. "You showed them who you are." That was the last time he spoke to me with anger. After that came desperation. He asked if we could reconsider timelines, if we could delay filings, if we could stay amicable for appearances. I declined everything. His brother stopped returning his calls. A cousin unfollowed him publicly. A family gathering went on without him for the first time in years. Renee lost more than contracts. Friends stopped inviting her out. A gym membership quietly expired without renewal. A women's group she'd helped organize removed her as a moderator without explanation. She moved apartments, changed her hair, posted less. The version of her that had felt untouchable vanished. The final legal meeting was brief. I signed. He hesitated. The mediator slid the document closer to him. "Once this is executed," she said, "there's no reversal." He looked at me then. Really looked. Like he was seeing the cost in full for the first time. "This isn't what I thought would happen," he said quietly. I met his gaze. "That's because you thought you were the exception." He signed. When it was over, I walked out alone. No relief, no triumph. Just a clean sense of closure that felt earned rather than gifted. Weeks later, I heard through someone else that Caleb had moved into a temporary sublet across town. Not terrible, not permanent, just diminished. Renee wasn't with him. By then, I wasn't watching anymore. The dismantling had finished. What remained was silence, and a future that finally belonged to me alone. The last time I saw Caleb wasn't dramatic. That surprised me too. He asked to meet after the divorce finalized, said he needed closure. I agreed because I wanted the end to be clean, not because I owed him anything, but because I didn't want him carrying a version of me that still felt unfinished. We met in a public place halfway between where we used to live and where I lived now. A quiet cafe, neutral ground, no shared memories attached. He arrived early. I could tell by the way he stood when he saw me, like he'd been rehearsing the moment and still didn't know how to place his hands. He looked thinner. Not unhealthy, just stripped down, like someone who'd lost insulation they didn't realize they depended on. "Maya," he said. I nodded and sat across from him. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. It wasn't awkward. It was honest. "I didn't think you'd come," he said finally. "I didn't think you'd need this," I replied. He winced. "I do." He ordered coffee he barely touched. "I didn't order anything. I've replayed everything," he said. "Every choice, every moment. I didn't mean for it to end like this." I tilted my head slightly. "How did you think it would end?" He hesitated. "I thought we'd talk. That you'd be angry, but eventually understand. That we'd separate cleanly, quietly, without consequences," I said. He didn't deny it. "I didn't think you'd move the way you did," he admitted. "You were always the steady one, the patient one. That was your mistake," I said calmly. "You confused restraint for weakness." He swallowed. "I never wanted to hurt you." You wanted to replace me, I replied. That requires harm. He rubbed his hands together, a nervous habit I remembered. Renee and I— Stop, I said. The word wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. I don't want updates. I don't want explanations. And I don't want you trying to reframe this into something manageable. He looked down. She left. I felt nothing. She couldn't handle the fallout, he continued. Said it wasn't what she signed up for. That tracks, I said. He looked up again, eyes searching. I lost everything, Maya. I held his gaze. No. You lost what you couldn't protect. He flinched. I know you think I'm cold now, he said, that this version of you is cruel. This version of me, I said, is accurate. Silence settled again. Thicker this time. I miss you, he said quietly. That one almost landed. Not because I missed him, but because I recognized the man who thought missing was enough to undo damage. I don't miss who I was with you, I replied. He leaned forward slightly. If there was a way to start over— There isn't, I said immediately. And even if there were, I wouldn't choose it. His voice broke, just a little. I would do things differently. You already did, I said. You just didn't like the outcome. He sat back, defeated in a way that finally felt real. I thought you'd want me to suffer, he said. I considered that, then shook my head. I wanted you to see me clearly, I said. That's different. He frowned. See you how? As someone you underestimated, I replied. As someone you thought would absorb betrayal quietly and disappear. I stood, signaling the end before he could say anything else. He looked up at me, panic flickering across his face. So that's it? Yes, I said. This is the last conversation we'll ever have. He opened his mouth, then closed it. I picked up my bag and paused, not for him, but for myself. There's one thing you should understand, I said. I didn't destroy your life. I stopped sacrificing mine to protect it. He nodded slowly, like the meaning was sinking in too late. As I turned to leave, I delivered the only line that mattered. Not sharp, not vengeful, just final. You didn't lose me because you cheated, I said. You lost me because you forgot who I was. I walked out without looking back, and this time there was nothing unfinished left behind. 3 years passed quietly, not in the way people imagine healing, not as a straight line, not as a dramatic glow-up montage. It happened in increments, new routines, different mornings, a life rebuilt without needing to announce itself. I moved out of Boulder for a while, not because I was running, because I wanted distance from the version of myself that had learned how to shrink. I took a longer contract out of state, rented a place that didn't carry anyone else's fingerprints, and relearned what silence felt like when it wasn't punishment. Work changed first. Without compensating for someone else's instability, my career expanded naturally. I took on projects I'd previously declined, spoke more directly, charged what I was worth. People responded to the clarity. Promotions followed without theatrics. I stopped explaining myself. My friendships shifted too. Some faded. Others deepened in ways that felt earned rather than assumed. I learned who didn't need me to be agreeable to stay. I learned how to let people show me who they were without interrupting them. The most surprising change was how little I thought about Caleb. Not because I forgave him, but because my life stopped revolving around the damage he caused. He became context instead of content. A chapter, not the story. I met Noah when I wasn't looking. There was no instant spark, no sweeping declaration. We met through work, crossed paths enough times to notice consistency. He didn't rush intimacy. He didn't probe my past like it was something to solve. He paid attention. When I told him about my divorce months later, he listened without defensiveness, asked thoughtful questions, didn't try to minimize it or frame himself as different. He didn't need to. We married quietly, no grand announcement, no proving anything. Just a small ceremony with people who knew what it had taken to get there. The day Caleb saw me again wasn't planned. It happened at a professional conference. One of those overlapping worlds that remind you how small things really are. I was walking through the lobby with Noah when I felt it before I saw it. Recognition. Caleb stood near the registration desk, thinner still, older around the eyes. When his gaze landed on me, he froze. His mouth opened slightly, then closed. His face drained of color as he noticed the ring on my hand. The way Noah leaned in to say something to me without breaking stride. He didn't approach. He didn't have to. The moment passed quickly, but the impact lingered. Not for me, for him. I didn't look back. I didn't check if he was watching. I didn't need to confirm anything. The power had shifted long before that room. Later, someone mentioned he'd taken a job out of state. That his life had settled. That he seemed quieter now. Smaller. I felt nothing about it. Because freedom isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself or demand recognition. It settles into your bones and makes everything else feel optional. The betrayal that once defined my days became a reference point. Not for bitterness, but for boundaries. It taught me what clarity feels like, what leaving with dignity requires, what strength looks like when it isn't reactive. I didn't win because he lost. I won because I stopped negotiating with people who didn't value me. And once you do that, truly do it, the past loses its grip. And the future opens quietly, exactly the way it's supposed to. Thank you for staying with me until the end. I know stories like this aren't easy to hear, but they matter, because silence is where betrayal survives. If this story made you feel something, click the hype button. It helps this reach the people who need it most. I'd also love to hear from you. Share your thoughts or your own experience in the comments. You're not alone here. And if you want more real stories about strength, boundaries, and rebuilding after betrayal, hit the like button and subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.